Hey, Indian Creek 8th grade students, it's Professor Blazek here with part 2 in our video series on World War I, looking at War Breaks Out. Now, the guiding question that I would like you to keep in mind as you watch this video is, what events led to the outbreak of World War I? Now, a common aspect of the world during this time was the presence of nationalism, which is a feeling of intense loyalty to one's country or ethnic group. In other words, people across the world often took on an us versus them mentality, where everything that could be described as us was seen positively, and everything that was not was hated. And nationalism would spread throughout Europe in the years leading up to World War I and would contribute to the outbreak of the war. Now, nationalism would encourage nations like Italy and Germany to unify and become world powers, which we talked about in our Part 1 video. Nationalism also inspired certain groups of people in Europe to break away from existing nations, and these ethnic groups would do this because they often felt their interests would be better served in their own new independent nations. Again, nationalism created a distrust of any government that was not run by people of the same ethnic group. And there were nations in Europe that were made up of many different ethnic groups, which caused a lot of tension during this time period. Now, nationalism would especially affect the Balkan Peninsula in southeastern Europe. This area had once been controlled by the Ottoman Empire, but that empire was beginning to fall apart, and the status of the Balkan lands was now uncertain. And because of this, Balkan countries like Greece, Albania, Romania, and Bulgaria would argue over territory, and this would create much unrest in that area of the world. Now, Russia and the Empire of Austria-Hungary were the main powers in the area, and Balkan citizens would only feel loyalty or really any positive feelings at all to just one of these nations, again, contributing to the tension in this part of the world. Now, many people who lived in the Balkans were Slavs, which was a very common and widespread ethnic group during this time. Now, Slavs had lived under the Ottoman Empire for a long time, and they were now looking to break off and form their own nations. And within the overall group of Slavs were a number of different smaller groups. And one of these groups, the Serbs, was the first Slavic group to establish an independent nation in this region of the world, which was called Serbia. You can tell where they get that name from. And after gaining their independence, the Serbs saw it as their goal to unite all of the South European Slavs. And Russia would actually support the Serbs because Slavs and Russians were from the same ethnic background. Again, kind of relating to the whole concept of nationalism that we've been discussing. On the other hand, Austria-Hungary opposed any type of Slav expansion because Slavs shared no ethnic background with the empire. Again, going back to the us versus them mentality that we were talking about. Now, drama would arise between the Slavs and the Empire of Austria-Hungary because Austria-Hungary had no intention of allowing the Slavic people who lived in the empire to break off and form independent nations. Austria-Hungary actually feared that losing any new lands to new nations would cause the empire to lose its place as a great power. And in 1908, Austria-Hungary would actually annex the Balkan lands of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Again, another example of imperialist actions. And this greatly angered both Serbia and Russia because Bosnia was a Slavic nation. So Serbia and Russia saw this move as an attack on all Slavic peoples. Now, if you look on this map, you can see the Balkan Peninsula outlined in the black square, just to give you an idea of where exactly in the world this was taking place. And you can see the different lands labeled there on the map. Now, during this time, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, and he's pictured there to the right. Now, on June 28th of 1914, Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were visiting Bosnia. Remember, Austria-Hungary had just annexed Bosnia, and this had caused a lot of drama in that area. And during their visit, members of the nationalist Young Bosnia movement, who had been armed by a Serbian terrorist group called the Black Hand, they would actually assassinate the royal couple as they drove through the streets. Now, these murders would obviously send shockwaves through the entire empire of Austria-Hungary, because Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir to the throne of that empire. And this assassination would leave the empire looking for vengeance, especially once it was discovered that it was a Serbian terrorist group who had supported the assassins. Now, Austria-Hungary would take Franz Ferdinand's assassination as an opportunity to deal with Serbia once and for all. The empire knew that attacking Serbia would mean war with Russia, because remember, Russia supported Serbia throughout this entire time because they were from the same ethnic background. So what Austria-Hungary did was to ask Germany for support, which Germany gave. Remember, Austria-Hungary and Germany had been in an alliance already. And this was a way to give Austria-Hungary backup in the event that things escalated. And then Austria-Hungary gave very harsh demands to Serbia, and Serbia knew that attacks could be coming, so Serbia went to Russia asking for support. And then once Russia gave its support, Serbia declined Austria-Hungary's demands, and this would set off a domino effect of war declarations due to the pre-existing alliances that we talked about in the last video. So on July 28th, exactly a month after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. And then less than a week later, Germany declared war on Russia as an ally of Serbia, and also on France, which was also an ally of Russia. So then now, in order to attack France, Germany would have to invade through Belgium. So Great Britain, who had pledged to protect Belgium, declared war on Germany. And then finally, on August 6th, Austria-Hungary declared war on Russia. And this would fulfill the potential for global war breaking out due to the alliance systems we talked about in the previous video, because it basically came down to, if a country declared war on one nation that was in an alliance, they would be going to war with all of the nations that were in that alliance. Now, these declarations of war began what was known as the Great War, fought between the Allied powers of Great Britain, France, Russia, and later Japan and Italy, and the Central powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, who would join very shortly afterwards. And then there's a map there on the right to show you exactly where the two sides of the war existed at the beginning of the fighting. So these were the events that led to the start of World War I, which is exactly what you are asked to reflect on in this video's guiding question. Be sure to think about imperialism, nationalism, alliances, and of course, Franz Ferdinand in your answer. I will be back soon with the next video in our series on World War I, and until then, this is Professor Blazek signing off.